Use the opportunity, the time that we'll spend with Joan, to get everything that you can, to be empowered in your stand, to get clear and resourced in your commitment, to get the Hunger Project one more time, newly, clearly for yourself. That's, for me, always the opportunity, and I invite you to have it be that way for yourselves. So really with that, I'd just like for all of us to welcome Joan Holmes.
Thank you very much. I'm very, very pleased to be here. I had the opportunity to sit at the back just for a little bit to hear the summary of 1986. And I was like looking also to see what was in the space. You know, was it that we were complete with 1986 and ready to go on, or was there something else to be said? And my sense of it was that you're really complete with 1986, really complete. I mean, you are really complete. And you kind of hope I don't talk anymore about it. So I want you to know I'm not going to talk about 1986 because I got it. And, you know, it was a great year. We took a lot of territory and we're more mature. But the point is, what's next? What's now? And I got that that's what we're really here to discover in ourselves and to discover for the Hunger Project. So where I'd like to start back at the beginning of the Hunger Project. And I'd like to look with you at what was present when we constituted the Hunger Project. Now, I don't care if you enrolled yesterday. The Hunger Project, when it was constituted in 1977, belongs to you. So the day, the moment, the second that you enroll, you take responsibility for all the Hunger Project up to that moment, and the Hunger Project as it unfolds into the end of hunger by the year 2000. So I want to look with you at your Hunger Project and the way it was constituted in 1977. So one of the things that the Hunger Project was constituted on was that the commitment was to be distinguished from the natural response that any of us as human beings would have to seeing someone else hungry. So I'll say it again. One of the things that the Hunger Project was constituted on was that its commitment was to be distinguished from the natural response that you and I or any other human being would have to seeing someone that was hungry. Now, I mean to be clear when I said distinguish from, not excluding. So the Hunger Project does not exclude that kind of feeling of empathy or sympathy, that kind of feeling of outrage, that kind of feeling that you want to do something. The Hunger Project includes that, but is not limited to that. The Hunger Project was constituted on that the commitment was to be distinguished from that natural response, including that, but to be an actual commitment to the end of hunger. So that's the way the Hunger Project was constituted, to be an actual commitment to the end of hunger. As you watch people who are in the presence, even if it's in the presence on television, with people who are starving, often the natural response is not the commitment to the end of hunger. If you are the Hunger Project, that is your response. And it is your response because you take a stand that it is your response. So your way of being is by choice that you are committed to be committed to the end of hunger. This does not exclude the feelings of sympathy or empathy, includes that, but it's distinguished from that and distinguished clearly from that. We started out the way we started out not because we thought that alone would end hunger, but because if you had a commitment to end hunger and there were certain things already in place in the universe, the thing that showed up missing was that ending hunger was not possible. So we started out the way we started out, not because we thought that that was in itself going to end hunger. But if you look out and see what was in the world, and you have a commitment to the end of hunger, what you would have discovered in 1977 was that the end of hunger in the culture of beingness, in the culture of human beingness, was not possible. At that time, it was unthinkable that hunger could end. Now, you and I are going to need to go back a long time to remember that, because it is so now that the end of hunger is possible. But you and I should have no problem remembering back to 1977, when it was unthinkable that the end of hunger was possible. So the Hunger Project, creating the end of hunger and starvation, is an idea whose time has come. If you are committed to the end of hunger, and you look out into the world and see what else is going on, you will want to know what's missing. And in 1977, what was missing was that the end of hunger was unthinkable. It was not possible. People's actions at that time were taken in a cultural environment which could best be described that ending hunger was desirable but not possible. All the actions that were being taken on the planet at that time were correlated to that clearing, were correlated to the end of hunger may be desirable, but it is not possible. So all the money that was spent, all the organizations' work, all the individuals' work, all the actions on the planet were correlated to that. So the Hunger Project took on the job of transforming the end of hunger from something desirable but not possible to something desirable and possible. You could say that that was the first phase of the job. That was the first thing that needed to happen in order to have hunger end. You cannot end something which it is in the planet thought impossible to end. Now, it's not that that job is over, but the job has been pretty squarely put in place. There's some more things we need to do to fill out that space. But it is true on the planet that we recognize it is a part of our culture. And I don't mean the Austrian culture or the Netherlands culture. I mean the culture of human beingness. It is now a part of our culture that ending hunger is now possible. Now, the Hunger Project set out to create that. It has been created. And to whatever extent we have had the opportunity to contribute to that creation, we've been privileged to do that. And that phase is largely complete. The planet, in the culture of beingness, now knows that it's possible to end hunger. I thought it wouldn't be inappropriate to spend a few minutes looking at some of the accomplishments that happened while we were making that planetary shift from hunger is inevitable to the end of hunger is possible. It's my observation, however, that we also created a shift from scarcity of food and resources to sufficiency. There is now not the public cultural conversation that there is not enough. In fact, now if you look in the newspapers, the issue is we have too much food, and no one knows what to do with that problem. It has shifted. But in 1977, the conversation was one of insufficiency. There has been a shift from scarcity of food and resources to sufficiency. There has been the demonstration that there is enough and that there are solutions. There has been a creation of the distinction ending hunger. If you started in 1977, you could not go into a library and find that as a distinction, nor any book or periodical or journal written on that distinction. That is now a distinction in the world. It's called ending hunger, and it was invented and created. We took the issue of ending hunger not away from the experts, but we took it out of having it be only their issue and opened it up to, as Bucky Fuller would say, little individuals. So just individuals could now participate with this complex global issue. We provided an opening for thousands and thousands and thousands of individuals to take actions consistent with the end of hunger. We brought individual commitment and responsibility into the public conversation about hunger. No longer was the conversation only dominated by victims, relief, and guilt. But now, when you talk about ending hunger in the public conversation, is also commitment and responsibility. We created the space for community, collaboration, and cooperation among organizations in the field. We took a stand for all other individuals, organizations, and institutions working on the issue of hunger. We began the transformation of positionality and the polarization of the arguments about how to go about ending hunger to an alignment toward the goal of actually ending it. There is no longer the domination of a debate of how to go about it or the right wrong with it. There is the recognition that there are a variety of ways to go about ending hunger, and each gives something unique to the situation. We took the complexity out of the issue and made it finite. We made it confrontable. We made it graspable. Everyone now feels that they have a hold on that global issue of ending hunger. We empowered the distinction between relief, immediate relief, and long-term development. We provided an opening for millions and millions and millions and millions of people to discover and to declare their commitment to the end of hunger. We unequivocally demonstrated that the pie of resources for this issue could be enlarged by the creation of another organization like the Hunger Project rather than diminished. Once the Hunger Project came on the scene, there was more money available for everyone working on the issue. We demonstrated unequivocally that you could raise money without resorting to the victimization of the hungry. We created an opening in which the hungry people are showing up as people of courage and dignity, rather than people who are helpless or hopeless victims. We transformed the persistence of hunger from guilt, burden, and shame to one of opportunity to participate in. We brought a bottom line ethic to the entire issue of hunger. We put a date, the year 2000, by which it will end. We put a measurement, an IMR of 50 in every country. And we put in an accountability to achieve those measurable results. We located the source of the persistence of hunger in who we are in the matter rather than the circumstances. So we now know the source of the persistence of hunger, and it's who we are in the matter rather than the circumstances. We have empowered people not only in this issue, but in any other issue, to begin to look for what's missing in order to resolve other global issues. And I think the list could go on. But those are some of what has been accomplished as we accomplish the shift from merely the end of hunger is desirable to the end of hunger is not only desirable, but possible. And I want to make clear that desirable shows up different when something's possible than when it's merely desirable. So now, the fact that the end of hunger is still desirable, but desirable means something completely different now that it's possible to end, and not just merely desirable. So when you say now the end of hunger is desirable and possible, it means something completely different than when we used to say the end of hunger is desirable. Desirable lived like some kind of faraway dream. It doesn't exist that way anymore. It exists in the space of, and it's possible, which takes it out of the realm of dream and puts it squarely in the realm of possibility. Now I want to look with you at the question that the Hunger Project has started to ask, and really has been asking for over a year or so. And it's the same question that we had in 1977. So we're asking the same question now that we asked then. Now the space is completely different. The cultural condition is completely different. The end of hunger is now possible in addition to being desirable. But the question's the same. The question is, we have a commitment to the end of hunger. We're willing to put our reputations on the line. We're willing to say that we are stand for the end of hunger by the year 2000. And now that the end of hunger is desirable and possible, and given what everyone is doing on the planet, what should we, the Hunger Project, be doing? That's the question we asked in 1977. That's the question that we're asking now. What should we be doing? In 1977, we realized that what we needed to do is create the end of hunger as possible. But in 1987, the end of hunger is possible and desirable. Now what should we be doing? You know, is it time to put our shoulder to the wheel? Should we start training the farmers in Africa? Should we go bother the parliaments and Congress? What is it? What decisive step, what next expression of the Hunger Project should we look to being? And I want you to know that as we were looking at it, that we kept ourselves pressed into a commitment that we would discover what's missing, that we wouldn't ask what's next out of what's popular, what this time would be understood, what would be appreciated. None of those influenced our looking or thinking. The issue was focused, and it was entirely on this question: what's missing? What's really missing between now and the end of hunger? What is it that keeps us from acting, taking those actions that would have hunger end? How is it that it's now possible to end hunger for the first time in the history of the planet? It's now possible, and still on the planet we are not taking those actions that will end hunger by the year 2000. What's missing? That's the question that the Hunger Project has been pressed into. That's the question that we did not want to veer away from. We became almost painfully clear that while it's now true that ending hunger is both desirable and possible, it is absolutely clear that there's no possibility that we will end it by the year 2000. Now that's a bitter pill to swallow after you've been working on a commitment for the end of hunger by the year 2000. And you and I need to confront what's so in the cultural condition, the cultural human condition, that culture that we live in as human beings. And the truth is that while it is true that ending hunger is now both desirable and possible, it is quite clear that without something, some kind of transformation, that there's no possibility that we will actually end hunger by the year 2000. One of the things that we need to keep remembering is that our actions are taken in a world, in a cultural condition, if you will, and our actions are now consistent with this cultural condition. It is now possible to end hunger, but it isn't going to happen. That's the name now of the condition. In 1977, people were taking actions for the end of hunger consistent with the cultural clearing called "The persistence of hunger is inevitable." That's changed. We are now taking actions in a cultural clearing called "It's possible to end hunger, but it isn't going to happen." And I dare say that you've had conversations recently with people when you let them know, and they know themselves, that hunger's going to end, and they say, well, sure, it could end, but, and then you can put a colon, and then we could call on anyone in the room, and you can add all the things that people say are the reasons that hunger's not going to end, right? Yeah. So before, it was just crazy to talk about the end of hunger. You start to talk about the end of hunger in 1977 with people, they wanted to lock you up. That's no longer true. People know it's possible. Everyone knows it's possible. And they're impatient with you that you even think that's big news. God, everyone knows that. But it's not going to happen. But it's not going to happen. Colon, because, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you and I need to recognize that we live on a planet in which human beings, and that means you and me, by the way. I'm going to get real personal now. This is not someone else. This means Helen and Joan, Susan, Philo. This means you and me as human beings have adapted ourselves to that while ending hunger is desirable and possible, it isn't really going to end. I charge us with the indictment that we have accommodated ourselves to the cultural condition called that while it's desirable and possible to end hunger, it really isn't going to end. And that you and I as individuals have accommodated ourselves, have learned to adapt to that. And that every other human being has learned to adapt to that. Therefore, 13 to 18 million people still die of the persistence of hunger in a world where everyone knows it's possible to end it. We have the food to end it, we have the resources to end it, we have the solutions to end it, and we do not end it. And you and I and every other human being on the planet have accommodated that. In our everyday behavior, we have adapted to that. It's important for us to recognize that our actions are shaped by the world that we live in, are shaped by the cultural condition. And once again, I don't mean the Indian culture or the United States culture. I mean the culture for human beings. That our actions, those actions that are possible from you and me, are those actions that that culture of human beingness allow for us to take. And only those actions are taken. So while we have high ideals, and while we have great visions, we don't act consistent to realize those ideals or those visions, except as the culture allows us to act. We act then and only then. So you and I are living in a human culture called, yes, it's possible to end hunger, and it isn't going to happen. And if you look, we're getting those kinds of actions against that possibility. So more and more people are making greater and greater contributions to their favorite charity. More money is being given. There are more articles in the newspaper on hunger. There's more stuff on television than ever before. More public figures are speaking out about it. It's safer. It's a safe thing to say politically. There's more real, visible public events. But all of that is taking place against a background of possibility. And we still aren't getting the actions that will irrevocably end hunger by the year 2000. Those actions that we're getting now are consistent with the cultural clearing called, yes, it's possible and desirable to end hunger, but we won't. And I say you and I and every other human being on the planet has accommodated that cultural condition. So what has become clear in the confrontation of all of that is that we would start to act consistent with the end of hunger. We would start to behave and have actions that would actually end hunger if we saw in front of us hunger not merely as a possibility, but as an opportunity that would pull for the actions that would be consistent for the end of hunger. So we now need to shift the planet so that the end of hunger is not only seen as desirable, the end of hunger is not only seen as possible, but the end of hunger is seen as doable. Then and only then will people start to behave and act consistent with the clearing that will give rise to those actions that will actually end hunger on the planet by the year 2000. We say that each of us, any of us, whether we're school teachers or governmental officials or prime ministers or farmers or heads of organizations or whatever, in our own way, if you and I were confronted with the opportunity, not just the desirability, not just the possibility, but the opportunity to end hunger, I say that we would take those actions consistent with that opportunity. For just a minute now, I want to define with you the word opportunity, since it's going to be our job in life to transform a possibility into an opportunity. I thought it best that we understood what we were going to transform the world into. So we're going to call an opportunity is when something is in front of you and you're left experiencing being empowered with respect to it. Something's in front of you and you're left being empowered with respect to it, and you're left with an opening for action. Now I want to talk about that. That is not some kind of option, like I could do this, or I could do that, or I could do the other thing. No, an opportunity would pull for an opening for action that calls forth that action. Do you understand? Not like an option, but the action. It would pull forth that action. So when we say we're going to transform the world from having the end of hunger merely be desirable and possible to be an opportunity, we mean like when an opportunity, and you can think of a million times in your life, in your personal life, when an opportunity appeared to you, was kind of in front of you, and you kind of were left experiencing being empowered in its presence. And you were experiencing with an opening for action. And it pulled for the action. You didn't sit around and say, oh, I could do this or that or whatever. It pulled for that action, and you were in action before you even said, oh, I'm in the presence of an opportunity. Weren't you? And afterwards you looked and said, oh my God, my action was phenomenal. But you didn't say that at the time. At the time, the opportunity pulled for you to behave outrageously, to behave effectively, to behave potently, to take those actions that were decisive. You and I now want to transform the cultural clearing that exists on the planet, which says the end of hunger is merely desirable and possible. We want to transform that into the end of hunger is an opportunity. So the job of the Hunger Project is to transform the possibility of ending hunger into the opportunity of ending hunger and fulfill that opportunity. That's now the job. That's now the challenge. That's now the mandate. We are not talking about a change of direction for the Hunger Project, but rather a rebirthing of ourselves in the same direction, a natural unfolding of ourselves. In creating an idea whose time has come, the first thing you would do is have the idea be possible. And after that, you would have it be not only possible, but an opportunity to fulfill. It is a natural unfolding. It is what's next naturally, if you look. So the Hunger Project's job is to transform the possibility of ending hunger into an opportunity to end hunger. By opportunity, we mean that hunger will live like an opening for people to act. For people to act, the actions of which will result in the end of hunger. So no longer will the end of hunger live like something no longer will hunger live like something that people are annoyed about, or people complain about, or people have dreams about its ending, or people even have great visions about the way the world will look like when it ends. It won't live like that any longer. It will live like an opportunity that pulls for the actions that are now missing that if the planet took would result in the end of hunger by the year 2000. So we want to transform the possibility and into an opportunity. And when we say opportunity, you know that we mean an opening for action, that calls forth action naturally. People are not going to sit around and say, I'm now being called forth into action. It will just happen if you create an opportunity. So, if you look, we could say that we see two things missing that could be summarized by one statement, one idea. So the things that we see missing between now and the end of hunger would be, one, the comprehensive, coordinated, strategic plan for the end of hunger. That's what we would call the technical name for it. The coordinated, comprehensive, strategic plan for the end of hunger. The more philosophical name for that part of the whole Hunger Project will be called a structure for fulfillment. What we lack is a structure for fulfillment of the possibility that we have created. Technically, that would be called a coordinated, comprehensive, strategic plan for the end of hunger. The second thing that's missing is the leadership and management for the end of hunger. And when we say leadership, we don't mean just merely leadership that's inspirational, not merely that. However, when we say management, we just don't mean administrative. We need both parts of that in the leadership and management, the inspiration, the administration. Those people who can translate an idea into a structure of fulfillment so that it happens into reality. Those items put together, that is, the vision and strategy and the leadership and management, those that are now missing, could be called under one label, a project for the end of hunger. This then would transform ending hunger from a possibility into an opportunity. So what you and I are meeting about today is the path between possibility and accomplishment. That's what you and I want to see whether we can bring off. Now, we have created a possibility. That was not a small accomplishment. That was a huge win on the planet. It did not result in the end of hunger. And since your commitment and my commitment is the end of hunger and starvation on the planet by the year 2000, we have more to go. However, you and I couldn't be having this conversation until we had the accomplishment of having achieved the creation of a possibility. You cannot end something that people consider to be inevitable. You can end something that people then consider to be possible to end. So you have created a possibility on the planet. And now what we're talking about is the path from that possibility to accomplishment. That's our issue. That's what's next for you in the Hunger Project. That's what's next for me in the Hunger Project. That's what's next in the Hunger Project. Can we take a possibility and create it into an accomplishment? We say the way through is to take that possibility, transform it into an opportunity to fulfill. We say that people will act if they're acting in a cultural clearing that is consistent with an opportunity and not merely a possibility. So what you and I are going to talk about for the rest of the time is having a possibility end up as an accomplishment. You see, part of why creating the end of the persistence of hunger and starvation is an idea whose time has come, part of why that hasn't yet happened, why that idea hasn't come, is that no one sees how it could be done. No one has any idea how it could be done. And until people have an idea of how it could be done, it shall not be done. What's now necessary is people need to end up with an idea of, oh yeah, I can see how that could be done. Oh yeah. So we want to meet a couple of years from now when you could talk with people on the street and say, oh, everyone knows the plan for the end of hunger. I mean, that's obvious to everyone. Now what's next? Oh yes, this country's here and that country's there and this plan. Yes, we have a coordinated plan on the planet for the end of hunger. And it's graspable, it's practicable. Yes, it's doable. We know how to finance it. It's clear to everyone. Unless that happens, hunger will not end. So for you to deliver on your commitment to create the end of hunger and starvation as an idea whose time has come, phase one of that was to have that idea, the end of hunger, even possible on the planet. Phase two is to allow people to see that it could be done, that it is doable, that it could work. I want to talk with you about our thinking about the strategic plan for the end of hunger. And in here I could say, what's the structure of fulfillment? And then you could call it the comprehensive coordinated strategy for the end of hunger. Either works. So we see that it has four distinct elements. One is the development of a substantive strategy. And that would be a strategy developed by experts who know. You could call it a fact analysis or a technical analysis. We would look at the issue of hunger and identify the component parts that would need to be addressed in order to have it end. We would get the best experts on the planet, the best representative experts on the planet, and they would meet long enough that they would sign off on that part. So one of the component parts would be safe water. We'd get the water experts in a room and not let them out till they agreed on that part of the substantive strategy. We would not let them know that our strategy was to lock the door until they got it. And then we would identify the redistribution of land as another component part and get the people in the room to work that element out. So there are discrete elements. It's not everything in the world. Female literacy is a very, very important part of ending hunger. So we would get the people who were most knowledgeable about that component part of ending hunger in a room and say, this is what really needs to happen on the planet in order to have hunger end in this area. So the first part is what we call the substantive analysis or the substantive strategy. The second part would be to take that substantive strategy and put it in a way, communicate it in a way that it could be adopted. It's been our observation that experts do not have the challenge of communicating in a way that anyone except another expert needs to understand it. So we will take the expert plan, and without losing the integrity of the analysis, we will make it communicable so that it can be adopted, can be understood, people could say, oh, I see what they mean. It would be immediately graspable, so it could be communicated. The third part would be to take that plan or strategy to the private sector leadership in the world in a way that we foment the action to get that plan adopted. And the fourth would be to sell it to governments at the highest possible level so that it lives in government as a priority and something they see to be in their best interest. So once again, the first part is to develop the substantive strategy. We will begin meetings in May of people who are experts on various parts of the component parts of the end of hunger, so that the experts can get together and develop those component parts. We will then take what they produce and we will make it into an adoptable version of the plan. People will say, oh, I see what you mean. They will immediately grasp that it's practical. It will not be a blueprint at all. It will be an opportunity, an opening for action. We're not interested in the right plan. We're interested in a plan that can be communicated and adopted and will galvanize the world to end hunger. That's the right plan. We will then enroll the private sector to adopt the plan. Now in here, you should kind of hear your role for yourselves here. So we're going to need the people in churches, universities, businesses, artists, runners, the legal profession, the medical profession, high school students, and I could keep listing. Really to know about the plan and to be willing to make it their own. We want to mobilize support for it. Millions and millions of people are going to need to be for this, and for it enthusiastically. People are going to need to be saying, hey, there's a plan for the end of hunger. These are the component parts. There's only X number of component parts. I've looked it over. It works. I want to tell you about it, and I want to meet at your service club so we can get everyone signed on for this plan. You know, this thing, if we follow this plan, it could actually work. We could end hunger by the year 2000. It's doable. You know, a few years ago, you know, I knew it was possible and everything, but some of the experts got together, and now we really have a plan that makes it real doable of what to do. So that people, can you see if there were this plan, that actions would start to move toward that plan? That it would begin to align everything in every country? That people would start, when they're making their own 5-year plans, or the countries get together, they would start to look at this plan and their own plan and say, now, are we consistent with the end of hunger here? You wouldn't even need to ask them to do it. It would happen naturally. It would be a natural unfolding, a natural alignment. Service clubs would look and say, now, are we doing everything that we can do appropriate to this plan? Corporations who work abroad would say, you know, is our business consistent with this plan? Is there anything that we can do to kind of change? You wouldn't need to go to corporations to say, will you do it? By the very fact that there was a plan that people were talking about, that people got behind, that could be publishable, that could be understood, would start to unify and align all the efforts and call forth those actions that are presently not being taken, that if taken would end hunger. The plan is the opportunity. The plan is the structure of fulfillment. It needs to call forth. It needs to provide a freedom to be and an opening for action. It is not a blueprint. It will not say, do this and then that and then this and then get these 3 people to do that. That kind of blueprint fails. You know that for yourself. It really, when you know the strategy for something, is when you've acted it out, right? At the end, you look back and say, hey, this was the strategy. At the beginning, you had no idea what it was. You had some kind of sense of it, because a kind of sense of the major milestones, a sense of a plan that really was pretty good, but you found out really what it was in the action. And it wasn't so specific that it narrowed you down out and left no room for your creativity. Well, that's the kind of plan this will be. It will be open. It will pull for openness, creativity, action, so that at the end of it, we will really know what the plan was. What we want is the plan that will call forth the actions to have hunger end on the planet. After it ends, let someone look back and see what the real plan was. That's not our job. Our job is to end hunger. What people do with the analysis of after it's ended is someone else's job. So this plan will be communicated to the private sector, to businesses, to churches, to universities. Millions and millions of people are going to need to know that there's a plan. They're going to need to be able to grasp it. They're going to need to be able to see it's doable. It's going to be what's talked about on the planet. Is this plan for the end of hunger? And however it turns out, I have no idea. Maybe it will be a plan that will focus on different countries. Maybe it'll be a plan that focuses on the whole all at once. But what people will know is, my God, I used to think that ending hunger was merely possible. I can see it's doable. And actions will start to be correlated with it's doable. Their actions are now correlated with it's possible, but it won't be done. You need to change the clearing so actions on the planet are correlated with it's doable. We want large kind of institutional mobilization of people for the plan. We don't have any investment in the plan. And by the way, it will not be the Hunger Project's plan for the end of hunger. It will belong to the world. It'll be the plan. And if people get eager about it, maybe there'll be more than one plan. It's irrelevant. The issue is there a plan for the end of hunger? Can you look through it and say, gosh, I could see it could be done. I better tell my school about this. Ultimately, we want to have governments involved in the end of hunger. they're going to need to be involved. They have the capacity and the resources that is necessary on the planet to have hunger end ultimately. We're going to need to have political leadership at the highest levels see that ending hunger is something that fits their priority for their government and is in their best interest as their government. It's like people will be able to go to their governments and say, look, we have a plan. The experts in the world have signed off on it. The people who know say this plan will work. We have the private sector, that is millions and millions and millions of people mobilized behind this plan and are ready to go. Now we'd like you to put it in your priorities. That's pretty attractive. It's a pretty attractive way for a government to sign on to participating in and taking leadership for the eradication of a global issue. I dare say that everyone has their own individual kind of process when we were in the transition from phase 1 to phase 2. Truly, isn't it? I mean, everyone has that story. It may not be exactly that, but it wasn't smooth. There was a time when at the beginning, who knew what that was? So you just did it. But then you kind of got on track. And boy, you could roll it out. What you did made a difference. You did what made a difference. Your speaking was on. Everything was great, wasn't it? Even the failures worked. I mean, even that didn't work, worked. And you got better at it and more able and more sophisticated. You looked better at it. And then there came a point that you were doing all that and it stopped working. And you weren't as facile at it. I mean, even if you were facile, you weren't. And even if even if you said things well, it was like it wasn't the thing to say. And so everyone has their version of that transition. Like, however that was for you, if you can allow it to be like you have, the transition from phase 1 to phase 2. You know, people began to question their commitment. People began to question the Hunger Project. People began to question everything. Only in the transition from one transformation into another. We didn't say ending hunger would be easy. We didn't promise that. We were smart enough not to promise that. And as you create an idea, time has come. And the first thing to create something possible, as you can see you're winning, it's going to be possible, you begin to say, what's missing? And we weren't the only people who said it. Andy said it. Everyone said it. What was missing now? But not what's missing as an invalidation, not who's wrong, but what's missing. What's missing now between now and the end of hunger? That then became the inquiry. Now, we had that inquiry formally in something called the Strategic Planning Committee. But I say that you had that inquiry informally, or you had it formally in committees. Everyone had that inquiry. And it's the next natural evolution. And it is a transformation of a project that stands for transformation. I haven't noticed one of those transformations being easy, being comfortable, being so you got to the new phase and didn't even know you got there. I've never had it be that way. Maybe that's number 3, I don't know. And I'm open to it. You know, maybe that's the next one. But this one wasn't that. This one was, my God, we've got it so right. How come it isn't working now? And it allowed us to see what's missing. Do you understand? So after we recognized there were possibility on the planet, and before Live Aid happened, and before Sports Aid happened, the inquiry into what's next had also happened. So it's like any good pool player. You don't wait for the ball to hit into the pocket You actually know it's going to go there, and you're planning the next step. So we were engaged in the inquiry even before there was the public recognition that the end of hunger was possible. And an inquiry to find exactly what's missing rather than something else takes as long as it does. Takes as long as it does to find that is missing. And it now sounds to me so obvious that one would for certainly transform a possibility and opportunity to fulfill it. Now we need to confront the accomplishment or lack of it of the end of hunger. And I think when we were creating the end of hunger as possible, that there were opportunities not to confront the accomplishment of actually the end of hunger. It looked like it would be such a big accomplishment to have people even get that was possible, right? Yes. Well, now we got that. But we still have the persistence of hunger. Now we're going to need to confront the accomplishment or lack of it of the end of hunger. And you and I have a promise that it shall end. That's the promise. Now, the way we're doing that promise is to create an idea whose time has come. But the way you measure it is in the reality called the persistence or the elimination of hunger. So that confrontation is up now. When I ever have the opportunity to work with the various managements of the Hunger Project, it seems that every management is pressed into the creation of a possibility and not the facility yet of creating a structure of fulfillment that would transform that possibility into an opportunity to have it happen. See, Andy, when you said you don't have the communication for money, and you said, maybe I need to be more inspiring or moving or something, what I would say, you need to speak in a way that you are an opening. The result of that opening is the action that people give you the money. And that is consistent with phase 2. That you be in a way, your speaking be in a way that you create an opening. And what you want an opening for is contribution. And people will contribute if they have an opportunity that is an opening, that is the appropriate action. And I say if we were looking in phase 1, we would see how could we be more inspiring about the possibility of giving money. And we would work on that. But if we're truly going to transform ourselves into being phase 2, not just understanding it, not just talking about the opportunity, but in fact being it, then we would want to know how do we communicate such that the opening is created that results in money being given to the Hunger Project. That now is the question. Since a structure of fulfillment is an opening for action and a freedom to be, that's what it is. And it's created by language, just like everything else is. So the whole way that we be will now be up for transformation. All the grace that we had, all the elegance that we had, all the facility that had, all the sophistication that we had in being great at phase 1, we now need to have that be in the past and be thrilled about it. Because I say what's in front of us now is a little bit of awkwardness and not knowing. And now, as Thomas said, being willing to start with nothing and bring ourselves forward to create the structure of fulfillment that would call for the actions consistent with the end of hunger. And I say that you will, in fact, in your hunger projects and your leadership and management, that's exactly where you are now. That you can create more possibility than you can fulfill. If you can do that, what's missing? What's missing? If your vision is that far out ahead of your results, what's missing? And I say it's the same thing that's missing on the planet, the structure of fulfillment. That is, an opening for action and a freedom to be. That is, the ability to transform a possibility into an opportunity and fulfill it. So we're perfectly placed on the planet, aren't we? What's missing in us, individually and as management and leadership for our hunger projects, is exactly what's missing on the planet for the end of hunger. Exactly. It's not close. It's not somewhere in the ballpark. It's a bullseye. It is exactly that. So that if you confront that in yourself, you confront that for the planet in providing a structure of fulfillment, the result of will be actions consistent with the end of hunger. How is it that you can vision X amount of dollars and get Y? That's the question, isn't it? You can create a possibility for 5 million and you get 2. Why? Because we still don't know yet, and we haven't been our opportunity to know how to be an opportunity to have the opening result in $5 million. People act appropriate to the opening available to them to act. And that's what you and I need to be facile in creating. That's what you and I need to confront that we don't know how to do yet. That's what's in front of you. That's in front of me. That's what's in front of the planet for the end of hunger. The transformation of a possibility into an opportunity to fulfill. That's why the world has more vision and more ideals than accomplishments. It's much easier to speak possibility than it is to see in which way to transform it in an opportunity to fulfill. And it is all conversation, by the way. We're not talking something that is not a conversation. We are talking a conversation. And now we want to transform the public conversation to, well, yes, ending hunger is desirable and possible, but it won't end, to the opportunity to end hunger and the fulfillment of that opportunity. You and I have accommodated hunger. Our own actions are consistent with and a correlate of the end of hunger is possible, but it won't happen. And that's the challenge for you and me today, to really look and see whether that isn't true. Not that you want hunger to persist. No, I don't mean that. But I mean in your everyday behavior that your actions are consistent with the end of hunger is possible, but it won't end. We want to now transform that. See, where we first worked when the persistence of hunger was inevitable wasn't out there, was in here, wasn't it? That's where all the work has gone on. If we can get any being consistent with the end of the persistence of hunger, I dare say it will happen. Because beingness is not Veronica's beingness or Philo's beingness, it's beingness. It's like Andy said, anyone can say what I'm saying once it is there to be said. It belongs to all of us. And in the culture called beingness now, it is that the clearing is the end of hunger is possible, but it won't happen. And you and I have a stand that it shall happen, and it shall happen by the year 2000. So the clearing we got now is insufficient. The clearing we got now needs to be transformed. You and I need to be a different clearing. There needs to be a new clearing in the world, because all actions naturally are consistent with the clearing that's available, naturally. You're not going to do anything that the culture does not allow for. So now we need to create a culture that will not only allow but pull for the actions consistent with the end of hunger. we say that that will happen when people get that the end of hunger lives for them like an opportunity. That is something that presents itself to you, that in the face of you feel empowered and there's an opening for action. And the action that there's an opening for is the action. That's when actions will happen on the planet consistent with the end of hunger, and not until then. So that's the job you and I face. And as Lynn said, it's a kind of, 10 years in it, or if you're 3 years in it, or whatever. It's like you're kind of brought up short. You just got good at the last job. And now, that's insufficient. As a matter of fact, if we do not become this new conversation pretty quickly, the possibility the end of hunger will dry up. Isn't that true? I mean, really true. And we worked so hard for that creation. And now it's time to go on to the unknown from nothing again, which is the only place from which you can create anything anyhow. You can't create something from something. You can only create something from nothing. So it's a pleasure to be back with nothing, because we need a lot of creation. So we better have a lot of nothing around. So now there's us and nothing. And we need to create an opportunity. We need a new clearing on the planet. We need to talk in a way, be in a way, the result of which are actions consistent with the end of hunger. The end of hunger needs to be in a way that everyone sees it as an opportunity. They may not use that word, but they're in action ending it. When are people in action doing something? When it's an opportunity to do something. Not when it's just merely a possibility, no. You look at your own meetings. You look at your own life. A lot of possibility. But when you're in action is when that's transformed into an opportunity, a freedom to be, and an opening for action. That's when you're in action, and it's natural. And it's not options. Oh, I could do that or this or that. No. You do that the clearing and the opening pulls for. That does not exist on the planet for the end of hunger. And it's yours and my job as people who have signed up to create the end of hunger and starvation as an idea whose time has come to now create that. It's a new age. It's a new phase. Now, I don't know how it was for you when you signed up. When I signed the little card, the 3x5 card that everyone said wouldn't make a difference, that I've now dedicated my life to that I signed on that little card, I didn't know there were phases. I barely knew there was the persistence of hunger. So I didn't know, oh, I see, we'll do phase 1, and then we'll get together in New York and do phase 2, and now there's 3. I mean, all I knew when I got clear about the Hunger Project is that if you then become the context, the end of the persistence of hunger is an idea whose time has come, that it will call forth that needs to happen on the planet for hunger to end. So if you become that, when one phase is complete, that's missing will be noticed and be called forth in its own transformation when you be that stand, that you are the stand, the creation of the end of hunger and starvation is an idea whose time has come. It can't happen any other way. You don't need to do anything about it. You don't need to sit up at nights and think, is there phase 3? There will be one if there is. And you will know it because the beingness has already declared itself to be that stand. So now we know, and we have known, as Andy and other people have said for some time, that we're in a transition or something new is happening or something's going on. That we used to be so good at, we're doing, and it's not producing the same results. So now we can put words to it. As Elizabeth said, all I did is put words to what you were seeing anyhow. And to the extent that I have done it accurately, it really matched your experience. Yeah, that's right. But it's not my words, it's your observation anyhow. It's your experience anyhow. It was there for you anyhow. It had to be. We knew something new was in the offing. I say that's why we didn't want to spend more time talking about 86. It wasn't it. We did a great year. I mean, that was great. But we knew it was time to go on. And not just to 1987. That wasn't the point either, was it? If someone had said the next person's going to talk about 1987, it's not to us, they're not. We got something bigger that we need to talk about. We need to talk about a whole new way of being now. Because that being that's now on the planet is insufficient to call forth the end of hunger, and we stand for that. We're committed to that. We need to produce that. It needs to be our accomplishment. And I say you and I have gotten away with not having to confront the accomplishment, the end of hunger. We were so busy with the accomplishment of the possibility that you and I didn't really have to confront the accomplishment called the end of hunger. That is the game. That is what we're going for. Nothing less. And the year 2000 is tomorrow, as far as I can tell. But it's possible. You understand? It's still possible. There's still enough time. Now, I wouldn't wait too long to begin the communication about the opportunity. Like tonight wouldn't be too early. And I say, to the extent that you and I have been successful about our being together, is that you will recognize in every part of your life that you are not sufficiently a structure of fulfillment. That you will discover what's missing, and it'll be right here, everywhere. In every aspect of who you are, you will discover an insufficiency in the structure of fulfillment. That you are possibility glitteringly, but structure of fulfillment, there will be an insufficiency. And to the extent that you can be with that, not as an invalidation, but as an opportunity, we can be that for the planet and the opportunity that is to end hunger and starvation by the turn of the century. So when you confront that in yourself, I say you're going to do it for the whole planet. Not everyone in the world needed to do the work you did in order for the people to know that the end of hunger is possible. There are people on the street that a few years ago didn't know there was hunger, that now know it's possible. So not everyone will need to do this kind of work on the structure of fulfillment either. But someone will. More importantly, it will be some people's opportunity, some people's privilege, some people's lives. We're now clear that the conversation on the planet is that the end of hunger is possible, but it won't happen. There's not a person in the world who's not clear about that. We want to get together someday when we're clear that there is now an opportunity and it is happening. We will then have other milestones that we will need to reach. But this is the one that we confront now. This is our job now, to take the possibility that was created and transform it into an opportunity to fulfill.